All right, Ken, be honest. How many goals have you decided to just throw the towel in
Oh
on?
my gosh. I was afraid you were going to ask me that on this episode. Um, More than I'd like to admit, but I know for sure three
Okay, this year
this year.
or
Yes.
okay. I was like,
No,
this
no,
year or
my
this quarter?
no, my entire life has just been three goals that I've
Yeah,
decided.
wow. A plus plus, gold stars across the board.
No, but every
Yeah,
quarter I've for sure dropped at least one. No, now that I think about it, at least two each quarter I've dropped. So what's that?
yeah,
Six.
yeah. It happens. I mean, I feel like this is so normal. And today we're going to talk about 4 reasons that people tend to quit on their goals. And we're going to talk through some ways to work around this so you can actually stick with them.
Let's do it. Welcome to another episode of Focus on This, the most productive podcast on the internet, so you can banish distractions, get the right stuff done, and finally start loving Mondays. I'm Ken Freire here with Marissa Hyatt.
Happy
Happy
Monday!
Monday!
It's another
Oh,
great week. It
yes.
is fall. It is beautiful.
The trees are colors are changing. Oh,
It's
it's
like my favorite time of year.
I used to always say summer's my favorite time of year.
Hmm.
But for some reason this fall, it's been really nice to see the colors change. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
look at those beautiful colors. I don't know why.
I feel like fall feels like a deep breath to me. Like every time we get to this part of the year, I'm like, oh, okay, good. We're here. I don't know. It feels so nice. It's cozy. I love it.
Y- You know,
But it can certainly be a time of year when we don't feel as like excited about our goals, or it's easier, I think, just with everything going on this time of year for us to throw in the towel and just say, man, I don't have the energy for it. I'm just not going to even worry, and I'll just wait till January.
100%. And I mean, I mentioned this earlier when we first started, but there are several goals that I had to quit on, and one of them for this quarter, primarily because of sicknesses with my family, myself, and then now the holidays feeling like it's coming up. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, there's no way I could make that a priority. But that's what we're gonna dig into today: the 4 reasons why
Yeah.
people quit their goals.
So let's go ahead and dive into reason number one of why you might feel tempted to quit on your goals.
Yeah, reason number one is that your goal isn't motivating. And I think what ends up happening here is that you've set this goal and you think you should do it, but you actually don't want to do it.
Yes.
And it gets exhausting. I think this happens a lot at the beginning of the year, right? People set these health goals or different types of goals that they want, but it's just because everybody else is doing it, not because they actually want to do it.
I remember going to a Tony Robbins conference years ago. This is the first time I had heard this, and you probably heard this as well, and a lot of you guys listening. But he said, stop shoulding all over yourself.
I love that.
Like, stop getting in this trap of "Oh, okay, I should do that, or I should do this," or whatever it might be. And we all do this. I mean, whether it's because you feel that peer pressure, like you're talking about, Ken, where okay, I've got to go set these health goals. That's what I'm supposed to do right now, or I should go do this. Whether it's, something with work where you feel like you should be doing something, but it may not feel personally motivating to you. I think a lot of people fall in that trap where maybe your boss hands you, hey, this is your goal. And you're like, okay, well, it doesn't feel exciting to me. It's not motivating. And I think what we can do with this is really go into our intrinsic motivation versus our extrinsic motivation, which the difference there is like, how is it personally exciting to you internally versus just externally? Those people telling you that you should do this or feeling that sense of peer pressure.
Yeah. Marissa, you mentioned something just a little bit ago of when there's a goal thrusted upon you at work, right? So, like, how do you get motivated when someone gives you a goal that wasn't yours? So, it's actually
Mm,
kind of harder to be intrinsically motivated.
yeah. Well, I think that first of all, I like to write down a list of why that goal feels motivating to me. Like, what are the things that, if the actual goal itself doesn't feel personally motivating. And this is probably true for a lot of you, even if it's not something that someone handed you, like your boss. There might be a goal that you're like, I really want the outcome of this thing, but getting to the goal or working towards that goal doesn't feel exciting. And so if you can write down a list of maybe what that goal enables you to do, um, that can all of a sudden ignite a lot of personal motivation for you. For instance, if you're in sales or marketing like we are, and you have some kind of a revenue target that you're being handed by your boss, and it feels like, gosh, this is not that exciting, or it can feel kind of daunting or whatever it might be. If you write a list of the reasons for you that that goal makes you become better, that it enables you to have more opportunities in your work, maybe it helps you win with your team. Maybe you get a bonus out of that. Maybe, I don't know, whatever it might be, but asking those questions, like really digging deep for you personally. And I feel like a list really helps with that. Um, and then if it's not something that your boss has done, like typically you can't you can't really change that, you know what I mean? If they're saying, hey, this is what you need to focus on for this quarter or this year. But if it is something that's personal to you and you're determining what the goal is, if it doesn't feel motivating, like that's a pretty good indication you may not want to do that goal. Like if you go through that exercise of writing out a list and you're still kind of coming up dry, then maybe that's not a good goal for you to actually have. And that could be a good indicator that you're just doing this because you feel like you should.
Yeah. And, if it was one of those goals that your boss gave you, hopefully you have a good enough relationship that you can go to your boss and be like, you know what? I don't know if this is the right goal. Is there anything that we could tweak? Or,
Right.
sometimes it might just be the strategy that
Hmm.
you're not motivated by. So
Yep.
different things like that are the discussion that we can have. But I love what you said initially, write it down and just figure out why. Like, why
Yeah.
would this goal be motivating to you? Because if you're not motivated, you're not going to do it. That's the
Yeah,
first
like what
reason
is
why
it
people
what
quit.
does it make possible? Ask yourself that question. What is this? If you were to achieve this goal, what does it make possible? And see what you come up with, because you might come up with some things that you didn't think of before, that didn't dawn on you until going through that exercise.
Yeah. Especially for those of you who are more like naysayers or a little bit more pessimistic in life. And that happens, right? Like when something gets thrust upon me and I don't like it, I could immediately shut it down.
Hmm.
Right. And I'm like, no, I don't like the idea. If it didn't come from me, it's not a good idea. Right.
Right.
So, but if I just stop and think, well, actually, this might be a good idea. What can I actually do with this? And what does it make possible? I'm more open and the optimism comes in. And then I could actually envision a brighter future, which is huge when it comes to different things like this.
Can I share just one that I have felt like I've wanted to give up on several times this year? I luckily haven't. So I have a goal of paying off a credit card that I have. And I don't really feel that excited about it. I mean, like, obviously, I'm excited to not have that debt and carry that and have to pay that thing, every month. That does feel, motivating. But in those times where it's kind of like, gosh, like, do I make this purchase or not? Do I pay extra this month or not? It can feel like super unmotivating. But the reason I want to pay that card off is actually it has nothing to do with getting out of debt. It actually is about, because I have this big vision and dream for my backyard. And I have told myself I will not um, touch my backyard until this card is paid off.
That's awesome.
And so this is a kind of another little hack for you if you feel like the goal itself isn't that exciting, like think of something that's what I was talking about, of what does this make possible for you? For me, paying that card off makes it possible for me to go have a beautiful backyard and landscape my backyard. I can entertain, I can garden. Like I have so many beautiful visions for that space. And therefore, I have stuck with this goal of paying off this card because it actually has nothing to do with that, but I want to get to what it makes possible.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So that leads to actually our second reason that people quit, right? So far, you haven't quit, you're motivated, right? But the second one is you have unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
So walk us through this. What are some of those unrealistic expectations and what can they look like?
Well, I think a lot of us fall into this trap, where we feel like we want to change too much at once. I would say this is like borderline my middle name. I truly am an overachiever to my detriment. Um, and I have done this, if you guys remember at the beginning of this year, which feels like a decade ago, I did a challenge with myself for what I called Hot Girl Winter. And I had all these various things that I was going to implement. And I came out of the gate so strong and I was so excited. And I had like a list of, you know, 7 or 10 habits that I was going to do every single day and was going to do it. I can't remember exactly how long I was planning to do it, but I was like so excited. I had the motivation, like the motivation was there. But the problem was my expectations were completely unrealistic because at the first sign of life not going according to plan, it all went out the window. Like literally the whole thing. And I think that this happens for a lot of us. Either we try to change way too much at once, or we are expecting that we're going to get those overnight results. Which may not happen, and tends to most of the time not happen.
Yeah, I think for me, back in June, I had this goal. For those of you who know who I do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and I was like, by the end of the year, I want to see if I could get to my next belt. It was pretty ambitious, and like
Yeah.
how much time I was spending on the mat, I was like, I need to spend like twice as much time. And I was starting to get there, but then summer hit, and then we're traveling, so then I can't be on there. And then Q4 hit, and my family gets sick, then I get sick, and I'm like, now the holidays are coming up, and we're traveling, and I realistically, I look at it, my time, I'm like, I don't think I'll be able to pull it off.
Yeah.
And I kind of was down on myself. Like I was disappointed. I was frustrated. I'm like, gosh, this is something I really wanted for myself, and I couldn't execute on it. And we
Mhm.
put this undue pressure on us because
Right.
at the end of the day, if I would have just looked at my schedule, I would have been like, no, I don't have the time to actually devote what needed to make that happen.
Totally.
So it's just something, if you guys are in that place, make sure you don't have unrealistic expectations. Look at how much time you actually have and how much time it's going to take to actually achieve your
Right.
goal.
Well, and I think you can kind of spot check this if you have a good trusted friend or spouse, like you can ask them, um, does this feel like doable within what you know about my life? Does this feel doable? If you've got one or two that you're kind of like, I'm not really sure. I think the other thing is that often when we have, these unrealistic expectations, it can feel really discouraging when those don't happen and we want to give up.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, for me, this happened where all of a sudden life happened. I had a few days where I was missing some of those habits I was trying to do. And I ended up throwing it out, like the entire thing, and not trying to put it in perspective and try to figure out how to adjust that goal, which is what I would typically recommend. But I think that one of the things that you can do, a couple things, is notice when you have one. Like notice with what's working, celebrate your wins, because it's often that we focus on what isn't happening or how much progress we're not making, which leads to feeling discouraged and typically quitting.
Yeah.
But if you can notice those wins, it's really helpful. And then, secondly, we talk a lot on Focus on This about only setting 2 to 3 goals per quarter. And I tried to do, kind of a sneaky way of saying, well, this is only one goal, but it was actually like 7 habit goals in one thing. And that didn't work. And the truth is, I was trying to do way too much. So, really rein it back in, only try to focus on 2 to 3 goals per quarter.
Yeah, it's huge. And even if you have one goal, force yourself. I think it's, but when you're talking about habit goals, force yourself to make it as small as possible. I think
Yeah.
I've done this with my health. If you guys have been following my health journey a little bit, uh, I started last October. I had a weight goal, but I also had a health goal. And all of you guys know Marissa and I are very similar. We're kind of like all in, like just go
Yep.
hard. And I was like, no, no, no. What's the one thing I could do? And I started with water. So if you guys were listening back a year ago, I was just like, can I drink enough water? And every few months, I would add a new habit. Right.
Mhm.
And now I'm at a place where I think, Marissa, I texted you this. I finally hit the weight goal I wanted to hit.
Yep.
And like I'm still not eating sugar. Right. And it's been what,
It's
since
amazing.
May or whatever
Yeah.
that is, we started that.
That's impressive.
And I don't feel bad. I'm like, I feel
Mhm.
great. And I'm like, just keep moving forward on those things. But it's
Totally.
because I took it and I just said, what's the one small goal or one habit that I'm going to do in the
Yep.
long run versus trying to cram 15 different habits like we used to do in a quarter.
Well, and if you imagine if you focused on one habit, for instance, not 7, but if you focus on one habit every quarter and installing that habit, by the end of the year, you've installed 4 new habits. By the end of 10 years, you've installed 40 new habits. Like, that's pretty inspiring and exciting, but it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
You can't all of a sudden get 40 all of a second, all at once. It's just not realistic. All right, let's go ahead and talk about reason number 3, which is similar to what we are talking about of unrealistic, but this is a little bit different. So, this is when you feel overwhelmed by your goal. This is such a big reason I think people end up quitting. It feels too big or too hard, like they feel excited, but then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, what do I even do?
Yeah.
So let's talk through this one.
Yeah. I think what ends up happening is that most of the time, what we've done is we've actually set the goal in what we've called the delusional zone.
Oh
So
yeah,
it's not just risky, it's actually absurd, right? There's a lot of fear, there's doubt, there's uncertainty that kicks in, right? And some of it is good. Like we need risk, right? Risk is good.
right.
Panic is bad in this
Yeah.
situation. But we all have done this, right? I think I remember this happening to me when I looked at all my personal hobbies. One of them was the belt thing that I just talked about. But then I had another one on a personal project that I was working on. And I was like trying to do both at the same time. And finally I realized I could only do one. But what I was trying to do in my mind was, how can I make both possible?
Yep.
And I, some of you every once in a while hear this. And if my wife listens to this podcast, she'll laugh. But every once in a while, I started thinking over the summer, I think I might be able to start doing a PhD sometime in this season. And then we started talking about me doing this cleanse. Remember
Right.
back in July?
Yep.
So I'm like
Yep.
trying to do all 4 of these things at the same time. And I just felt so overwhelmed
Yep.
because I was trying to solve for something that realistically I just didn't have the time. And it was just in the delusional zone. Like I couldn't pull it off. So what I had to do was I just had to say no. I had to look at
Yep.
everything and say, what can I possibly do right now that I know I could be successful in and have it within a routine and a pace that I could actually achieve.
Yeah.
Uh, and it took a while for me to say no to all those other things, but overwhelm is a big
Well,
deal.
it is a big deal. And I think that, we talk a lot in the Smarter Framework about making sure that your goal is risky. And people get this confused so easily. This risky goal versus like a delusional goal where you just are shooting for the moon. For you, like trying to shoot for getting your PhD right now, like that might be delusional given the rest of, your life right now.
100%.
And I think what we don't want is people to all of a sudden go to what's typically in the SMART framework, which is it needs to be realistic. Like that's boring. That's not inspiring. We don't need that. But we do need a healthy level of risk involved. It should ignite some of those fears, or not fears, those emotions that you talked about, like fear or doubt or uncertainty. Like we shouldn't necessarily be able to see the entire path to achieving this goal when we set the goal. That's not what we're saying. But we're also not saying it should be so big and so grand that you feel like you don't even know how to get started.
Yeah.
Where you go, oh my gosh, like how the heck am I ever going to be able to do this? It should feel risky, but not invoke total panic or anxiety. One of the best ways that you can combat this is if you feel, first of all, making sure you're going through that smarter framework, asking yourself, does this feel risky? Like, is this going to have to call out part of me that otherwise wouldn't have to come online? And you want the answer to be yes. You don't want this to just be a walk in the park for you. At that point, it's not really a goal, it doesn't really meet our criteria for a goal. But the other thing is that once you figure out that it does meet the smarter framework, it's risky and not delusional, then you just need to chunk down that goal and, really look at what is the next right thing for me to do on this. And if you just keep asking yourself that question, one day at a time, what's the next right thing for me to do to move forward on this goal? You will get so far in accomplishing that goal versus trying to think about how can I create the entire plan to accomplish this all in one time. It's typically doesn't unfold like that. Honestly, the best way to do this is by using our full focus planner. We have this built into that system in what we call the daily big three, where you set your three biggest priorities for the day. And that's all you're doing is asking, what is the next right thing for me to do to make progress on my goal? So it
Yeah.
really doesn't have to feel overwhelming if you just take it one day at a time.
Yeah. And one other litmus test that I added is that I've learned actually during the summertime when I had 4 big goals that I was trying to achieve, is that when I looked at my schedule and I looked at the next best steps that I had to take, I asked this question. I said, am I trying to accomplish all of this within a perfect like routine and like everything has to
Mhm.
align exactly as it hits? Or do I have actual margin in case things like life show up,
Right.
in case I
Totally.
get sick, in case things like that happen? And I found that every time I'm planning as if nothing will ever go wrong.
Gosh, isn't that the truth? Yeah.
Yeah, and then I realized like, oh, well, that's delusional, right?
Yep.
Like you got to plan with margin in mind that something's going to happen. And I found that ever since I've been doing that, my life has been a whole lot easier
Yep.
to be in the risky zone versus the delusional zone.
Well, we really fall into this trap, I think, of perfection, where we feel like if it isn't going perfectly according to plan, we throw it out. And I am like number one guilty at this 100%,
Yeah.
that I am such an all or nothing person. That's my personality. And I really have to check this. And I have to remind myself that it really is about progress. It's not about perfection. And so those days are going to happen, where you miss one day of, if it's a habit goal, you're going to miss a day every now and then because life happens. You forget, you're sick, you're busy, whatever may come in the way, of that. But it's about making sure that that doesn't become the consistent habit, that you still get back on track the next day. But it's not about saying, I have to have a perfect streak on this habit. I'm never going to miss a day. I mean, the truth is, life just happens sometimes, and that's okay. And you still should be able to accomplish your goals, even in the midst of life. That's really like the biggest thing here.
Yeah.
All right,
Good
let's
work.
move on to reason number 4, which is, I feel like, one of my biggest reasons for quitting goals, which is that you feel like you're just going at this goal alone.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like, to me, one of the biggest ways to ensure your success with a goal is to make sure that you have a support system, an accountability partner, somebody there who can provide that encouragement, that kick in the rear when you need it, because we all inevitably do at times. And I feel like when we don't have that, when we feel like we're just kind of in our own little world and nobody really notices whether we do it or not, that's when we're not successful and we give up.
Yeah. I think this is where it's important. Find a friend, find someone who's actually going to keep you accountable. But recently, I've talked to several people who have been interested in our coaching program who are like, I don't have those type of friends. And I'm like, if you don't have those types of people around you, this is when it's great to go hire someone, right? Whether it's a physical trainer, whether it's a coach, whether it's a counselor, whoever it is that's going to
Yeah.
keep you accountable to make sure you achieve the goals that you want to achieve. Because if not, you're going to just come back 6 months from now and be like, I quit on my goal. And you didn't know why. It's,
Yep.
at the end of the day, you
Yep.
just didn't have support.
Yep. It's really true. Um, This is like impromptu, and we weren't planning to talk about this, but I do think this is so relevant to this conversation, which is this concept of coaching and having somebody who can encourage you, who can walk you through a process or a framework to help you have all the tools that you need in your toolbox to be successful. I found that there's no better way to do this than coaching. Ken, this is like just totally off the cuff here, but I really think that our double win coaching program, this is brand new, you guys. We've just launched this within the last month. I think this is going to be such a key to people's success. If you feel like you're somebody who you're listening to this and you're like, yep, that reason, yep, I've quit a goal for that. Yep, oh yeah, I definitely quit for that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And maybe you still have goals, likely you do if you're listening to this episode, that you really want to be successful with, but you're just not feeling like you doing it by yourself is going to be the most, optimal way for you to be successful. I want to encourage you guys to consider joining our Double Win coaching program. You can book a call actually with Ken or Deidre, who's another member of our team. You can talk to him. Yes, it's really him on the phone. But this is where you get to explore and kind of dive into these goals that you might have and maybe some of the areas that you've struggled in the past or the reasons you've struggled to be successful with that. And if you want to do that, I want to encourage you to just go to fullfocus.co/strategy.
Yep.
But I do think that that can be such a game changer for people. We've tried to make it extremely affordable and so that you can get the coaching you need to actually accomplish those goals of yours. Because there's a lot at stake for you if you don't go after them and actually achieve them. And we want to make it as easy and as foolproof as possible.
Yeah, I love it. There's this African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do here is that, like, even if you don't work with us, you go find someone that you can go far with. That, like, you
Yeah.
guys are going to keep each other accountable. You're not going to make excuses. You are actually going to accomplish what you want. Because the way I like to think about it, when I'm having conversations with people, I say, how long have you had this goal or this dream in your heart for? And many times people say, I've had this in my heart for years. And I'm like, what's been stopping you from doing it? And
Yeah.
they're like, well, then all of the reasons for it. And some of them are very valid. So I don't want to discount it. But, like, what if you became really intentional and you found a friend or a coworker or colleague, anyone, or us as a coach, and said, hey, I really want to switch up my schedule and be intentional in achieving this goal, this dream in your heart. What would life look like a year from now? And it's a game changer. People are excited because they feel like they finally have vision and they're not drifting in life.
Well, just to recap as we kind of close out here, reasons that you may be tempted to quit on your goals is that you just don't feel personally motivated. You have unrealistic expectations, or you feel overwhelmed by your goal, or that you feel like you're just totally going at this alone. And first and foremost, I want to tell you, you don't have to quit on your goal. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, just because you had a hard day or just because you haven't had the right strategies to accomplish your goal. You can decide right now, today, to recommit to those goals if you are, in fact, committed to the end result. And if you are looking for a community of really supportive people, certainly our Double Win coaching program is fantastic for that. But I also want to remind you, we have a great Full Focus Planner community, which is our Facebook group. And we have thousands, tens of thousands of people inside of that group who will cheer you on and, walk alongside you as you're trying to accomplish your goals. Thanks for joining us on Focus on This.
This is the most productive podcast on the internet, so please share it with your friends and be sure to join the Full Focus Planner community on Facebook, like Marissa just mentioned, so you can benefit from the creativity and encouragement of people chasing big goals just like you.
And we will be here next week with another great episode. We're going to be talking about what to do when you miss a goal. So if you have, in fact, decided to commit to your goal, but you actually don't accomplish it, we're going to be talking about what to do when that happens.
Until then, stay
Stay
focused.
focused.